She grabbed the bowl and threw it across the room. Soup splattered across the wallpaper. The fine china shattered against the baseboard. And Margaret Caldwell, 68 years old, white-haired, trembling, pointed one shaking finger at the man standing in her doorway. "Someone in this house is poisoning me." Walter Whitcomb didn't flinch. He simply clasped his hands behind his back and said, "Very quietly, Mrs. Caldwell, you need to rest." That was the moment Nathaniel knew. His mother wasn't losing her mind. She was losing time. If this story already has your heart-pounding hit, subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments below. I want to know how far this story travels. Now don't you dare look away. Nathaniel Caldwell rode hard that night. No lantern. No escort. Just him and a black horse, and 4 months of fear finally breaking open inside his chest like a dam that had held too long. He had watched 4 doctors walk out of his mother's room. He had watched her go from a woman who ran 30 acres of accounts without blinking to a woman who couldn't finish a bowl of broth. He had listened to Walter calm, reasonable, always reasonable, Walter explain it away every single time. "She's confused, sir. It's her age. It's the grief of losing your father. These things take time." He had God help him. He had believed it. Until tonight. Until he watched his mother hurl a bowl of soup across her bedroom wall and scream that someone was poisoning her. And he looked at Walter's face in that moment, that perfectly composed, utterly unshaken face, and something cold moved through him that he couldn't name and couldn't shake. A man who had just been accused of poisoning someone should look surprised. Walter Whitcomb had not looked surprised. He had looked patient. So Nathaniel rode. He rode to the edge of Harrow County. To a dirt road off the main trail. To a narrow little building with a crooked door and a faded sign that read Hartwell's. A woman named Caleb Pruitt had told him about this place 2 winters back. Half drunk by the fire, saying, "She made my Eleanor eat again when the doctors had already written her off. I don't know what she did. I just know it worked, at the time." Nathaniel had filed it away and thought nothing more of it. Tonight it was the only thing he had left. He tied his horse to the post outside and knocked. No answer. He pushed the door open. The woman inside didn't look up. She was wrapping loaves in brown paper, her back half turned, moving with the easy efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times. She had dark hair pulled back, flour on both forearms, and the kind of stillness that didn't come from being calm, it came from being busy. "We're closed," she said. "Been closed since sundown. I'm aware of that." "Ma'am." She looked up then. She looked at him the way nobody ever looked at Nathaniel Caldwell, not like he was powerful. Not like he was dangerous, not like he was someone to impress or fear or charm. She looked at him like he was a problem she was deciding whether or not to take on. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. "Certain, not a question. You know me. Everybody in Harrow County knows you." He set down the loaf. Wiped her hands on her apron. "Not half," he said. "Enough." She folded her arms. "What do you want?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. He had rehearsed this on the ride over the right words. The right framing, the kind of dignified request that a man of his position made when he needed something. All of it evaporated standing in this small flour-dusted room in front of a woman who was looking at him like she had no particular interest in being impressed. So he just said it plain. "My mother hasn't eaten a real meal in 4 months. Every doctor in the county has given up on her. Tonight she threw her dinner across the room and told me someone in the house is poisoning her." He stopped. "I need someone who knows food. Someone who can look at what she's being given and tell me if she's right." The woman was quiet. The clock on the wall ticked 4 times. "Caleb Pruitt sent you," she said. "He told me about his wife, Eleanor." Eleanor Pruitt was grieving. She said it matter-of-factly. No sentimentality. She didn't need medicines. She needed someone to cook something honest in front of her, so her body remembered what real food felt like. She looked at him steadily. "That's not magic, Mr. Caldwell. That's just paying attention. Then come pay attention to my mother," he said. She studied him. "You said she thinks someone's poisoning her," she said. What do you think? The question hit him somewhere he wasn't ready for. He thought about Walter's face, that but unshaken face. I think, he said carefully, that my mother has never been a foolish woman. Not one day in her life, and I don't know what to do with that. Amelia Hartwell untied her apron. Who prepares her food? The kitchen staff. Walter oversees who specifically touches her food before it reaches her. He paused. I'd have to ask Walter. Then don't, she said. Don't ask him anything, not yet. She pulled her coat off the hook by the door. Does your mother have a lock on her bedroom door? Yes. Good. She picked up a canvas pack from beneath the counter already packed. He noticed, like she had done this before. I'll bring my own ingredients tonight. We start fresh. Nothing from your kitchen until I know what we're dealing with. She turned to face him. I have 3 conditions, he raised an eyebrow. First, I work alone in that kitchen in the mornings. No staff, no oversight. Done. Second, nobody tells Walter Whitcomb what I'm looking for until I say so. A beat. Done. Third, she looked at him hard. When I tell you something, you listen. You don't explain it away. You don't tell me I'm wrong. You listen first and then you decide. She waited. Can you do that? Nathaniel Caldwell was not a man who was spoken to this way. Not by staff, not by tenants, not by anyone who existed on the other side of the social divide that separated his family's name from the rest of Harrow County. But he thought about his mother's hand, pointing across a ruined, soup-stained room. And he said, yes, ma'am, I can do that. Amelia nodded once. Like a deal struck. Then let's ride, she said. Walter Whitcomb was waiting on the front steps when they arrived. Of course he was. The man always knew when something was coming. Nathaniel had always thought of it as competence. Now, standing in the dark, watching Walter's eyes move from him to the woman beside him and back again, he thought of it differently. Mr. Caldwell. Walter's voice was smooth as riverstone. You've returned, and you've brought Miss Hartwell, Nathaniel said. She'll be working in the kitchen. Something passed through Walter's eyes. Quick. Gone before Nathaniel could name it, of course. He turned the full warmth of his attention to Amelia. Welcome to Caldwell House, Miss Hartwell. I am Walter Whitcomb. Household manager. Anything you need, you come to me. Thank you, Amelia said pleasantly. Too pleasantly, Nathaniel thought. I'll need to see the kitchen tonight, she added. Just to get familiar. I like to know a kitchen before I work in it. It's Walter started. It won't take long, she said. She smiled at him. A perfectly friendly smile that gave away nothing at all. I don't bite, Mr. Whitcomb, I just bake. Walter held her gaze for 1 second longer than was comfortable. Then he smiled back. Right this way, he said. Amelia moved through the Caldwell kitchen like she was reading a book. She didn't rush, didn't make noise. Just walked the perimeter slowly. Eyes moving over shelves, over the arrangement of containers, over the way the pantry was organized. Rosa, the young kitchen girl, watched from the corner with curious eyes. The older man at the stove didn't look up. Walter stood in the doorway, watching her watch the room. The household inventory is fully stocked, he said. We source from Granger's in town, same as we have for 15 years. Quality hasn't varied. Amelia crouched to look at the lower shelf. Stood back up. And Mrs. Caldwell's meals, are they prepared by the same staff as the household meals? We take particular care. Same staff or different? She asked. Still pleasant. A pause. It varies, Walter said. Depending on availability, Amelia nodded slowly. Her eyes drifted to a cluster of small containers near the back of the middle shelf, set slightly apart from the rest. Not dramatically, just slightly, the way something gets moved and returned to almost the right position. These are lovely shelves, she said, looking away. Very organized. You've clearly run a tight ship, Mr. Whitcomb. Walter relaxed, almost imperceptibly. 23 years, he said. This family trusts me completely. I can see that, Amelia said. She turned and smiled at him one more time. I think that's all I need for tonight. Thank you for the tour. In the hallway, Climbing the stairs toward the guest quarters, Nathaniel fell into step beside her. "What did you see?" he said under his breath. "Not yet," she murmured. Amelia. She stopped on the landing and turned to face him. She was 2 steps above him, which put them almost eye level, and she looked at him with an expression that was neither unkind nor particularly patient. "Mr. Caldwell," she said quietly, "if I'm right, then what's in that kitchen is evidence. And evidence has to be handled carefully, or the person who put it there has time to make it disappear." She held his gaze. "I need one night. I need to talk to your mother in the morning. And then I'll tell you what I found, and if Walter asks what we discussed, tell him I needed to see the pantry layout. Tell him whatever boring true thing you can think of." She turned back toward the stairs. "He already knows I'm looking. He just doesn't know what for yet. We have a small window before he figures that out." Nathaniel caught her arm. "Not rough, just enough to stop her." "How do you know he's already suspicious?" he said. She looked at his hand on her arm. He let go immediately. "Because the man spent 23 years getting trusted completely," she said. "Men like that don't get caught off guard. They see threats coming and they move to contain them." She looked at him steadily. "He wasn't surprised to see me arrive, Mr. Caldwell. He was calculating how much of a problem I am." She paused. "Which means we need to move faster than he expects us to." She went upstairs. Nathaniel stood on the landing and stared at the wall. Then he looked down the corridor, toward the kitchen. Toward Walter's domain, 23 years of it. He was calculating how much of a problem I am. He thought, what does a man calculate that for? Unless he has something to protect. The light was still on under Margaret's door. Amelia knocked twice. Soft silence. Then the voice was sharp. Alert. Nothing like the thin, confused tones the doctors had described. "Amelia Hartwell, ma'am. I'm a baker. A beat. I just wanted you to know I'm here in case you hear someone moving in the kitchen tonight and wonder." A long pause. The lock turned. The door opened 3 inches. One eye dark, direct, and absolutely present, looked at her through the gap. Margaret Caldwell was thin, the kind of thin that came from months of refusing food. Her silver hair was loose around her shoulders, and her hands on the doorframe were bird-boned and pale. But her spine was straight and her gaze was level. And Amelia understood in that instant that this was not a woman whose mind was failing. This was a woman whose body was failing her because she had made it fail. Because she had decided that refusing was safer than eating. "A baker," Margaret said. "Yes, ma'am. Not a doctor, not even close." Something shifted in the old woman's face. Not warmth yet, but recognition. The particular recognition of someone who has been overhandled for a long time and is suddenly standing in front of a person who isn't performing care at them. "My son thinks food will fix me," she said. "Your son is scared," Amelia said. "He's trying everything he's got left, and you know that. Which is why you haven't sent me away yet." A beat. "You're direct," Margaret said. "Yes, ma'am. I've had 6 months of people who weren't." The old woman's jaw tightened. "Say what you came to say." Amelia looked her in the eye. "I believe you," she said. "About the food." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Amelia had ever heard. Margaret's hand tightened on the doorframe, her chin lifted by a fraction. And in her eyes, those sharp, exhausted, relentlessly intelligent eyes, something cracked open. Something that had been held shut for a very long time, under the weight of not being believed. "The doctor said," she started. "I know what the doctor said," Amelia said. "I'm not a doctor. I'm a woman who has spent her entire life knowing what food is supposed to taste like and what it isn't supposed to taste like." She paused. "And I'm a woman who has learned that when somebody says something is wrong and the people around her say no, it isn't, the truth is almost never on the side of the people with more power." Margaret stared at her. "I want to cook for you tomorrow morning," Amelia said. "Everything fresh, my own ingredients, nothing from this kitchen. And I want you to tell me what you notice." She waited. "Will you let me do that?" Margaret Caldwell, who had not trusted a single person in this house for 6 months, was quiet for a long time. "Sunup," she finally said. "I won't be." The door closed, and Amelia stood in the dark hallway and breathed slowly and thought about those containers on the back shelf, moved just slightly from where they had been when Walter first showed her around. Moved between the time she entered the kitchen and the time she left it. She had been in that kitchen for 15 minutes. Someone had shifted those containers while she was still in the room. She just hadn't seen who. She was up 2 hours before sunrise. She took her canvas pack and went down the back stairs and into the kitchen before the coals in the stove had been cooked for the morning. The room was empty and gray and quiet, and she worked in near darkness by habit. She had been baking before dawn since she was a girl, and she did not need much light to do it. She used nothing from the shelves. Everything came from her pack flour mixed by her own hands, salt from her own tin, dried rosemary from her own garden, a wrapped piece of fatback she'd brought from her cold storage. She pumped water fresh from the outdoor tap, letting it run cold over her hands before she filled the pot. While the bread rose and the broth came together, she moved quietly to the back shelf. She studied the containers without touching them. 6 of them, grouped loosely together. 2 had visible dust lines interrupted the kind of fine displacement you only noticed if you were looking for it. The lids were different from the rest of the shelf, not the standard Caldwell household crockery. Different maker. The labels on the sides were handwritten, not printed. She leaned close and breathed in faint. Underneath the general smell of a working kitchen. Bitter. Not spice bitter, not herb bitter. The kind of bitter that sat too far back in the nose. The kind that didn't belong in a kitchen. She straightened up and went back to her bread. She carried the tray upstairs at first light. Bread broth. A small pat of butter from a sealed crock she'd found untouched behind the main cold stores. A glass of clean water. She set it on the bedside table. She sat down. She did not offer. She did not encourage. She did not perform the soft coaxing routine that she knew Margaret had been enduring for months. She simply sat in the chair beside the table and waited. Margaret looked at the tray. "You didn't take anything from the kitchen," she said. "No, ma'am." "Why? Because you told me the food was wrong," Amelia said. "And I believed you. So I started from scratch." Margaret reached out, broke a small piece of bread, held it under her nose the way a person holds something they are afraid might hurt them. Then she put it in her mouth. She chewed, swallowed. "It tastes," she said slowly, "like bread." "Yes'm." "Ma'am, like bread is supposed to taste." Her voice had something raw in it. "I had forgotten." She broke another piece. "The food here, Nathaniel's kitchen, it tastes like something is underneath it. Something that doesn't belong. Something." She stopped. "Bitter," she said. "Like metal and something rotten underneath the bitter." Amelia said nothing. "My husband's cook for 30 years could taste the difference in water quality between 2 neighboring wells," Margaret said. "I grew up knowing that food tells the truth even when people don't." She looked at Amelia directly. "I am not imagining it." "I know," Amelia said. "Tell me what you found." "I found containers on the back shelf that don't belong to this kitchen," Amelia said. "Different maker than your household supply. Handwritten labels. And they smell wrong." She held the old woman's gaze. "I didn't touch them. I don't know yet what's in them. But something is there that shouldn't be, and it's sitting on a shelf that your household manager controls completely." Margaret was absolutely still. "Walter," she said. "I don't know that yet," Amelia said carefully. "I have a smell and a shelf position and a man who moved those containers while I was still standing in the room. That's not proof. That's a direction. I have been trying to tell Nathaniel about the accounts for over a year," Margaret said. Her voice was controlled, but there was something volcanic underneath it. "Deliveries I can't account for. Figures that don't match the records I kept when I was managing the estate. Every time I raise it, Walter explains it away, and Nathaniel..." She stopped, pressed her lips together hard. "My son trusts that man the way he trusted the ground under his feet. And I am an old woman who throws soup at walls." So Amelia leaned forward. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said. "Look at me." Margaret looked at her. You are not an old woman who throws soup at walls, Amelia said. You are a woman who identified a threat in her own home and has been screaming about it into a closed room for 6 months because no one would open the door. She paused. I'm opening it now, but I need you to do something. What? I need you to get out of this bed, Amelia said. Not today, but soon. Because when this comes together and it will, I need Nathaniel to see you standing. Not lying down. Standing, she held her gaze. Margaret Caldwell looked at this woman, this plain, flour-dusted, poor baker woman who had walked into her room and handed her the first moment of being believed she'd had in half a year, and something rebuilt itself in her face. Something vertebral, something that had been there all along. Just buried under months of being managed and dismissed and gently, persistently silenced. I've been managing this estate since before Walter Whitcomb knew what one was, she said. Yes, ma'am, Amelia said. I think I can manage to stand up. Nathaniel was in the hallway. He had come to check on his mother, same as every morning. Same dread, same bracing, and he had stopped outside her door when he heard her voice. Not confused, not fragile, certain. He stood with his back against the wall and listened to her tell Amelia about the accounts. About the deliveries. About a year of questions that Walter had answered so smoothly that Nathaniel had stopped noticing he was being redirected. His jaw tightened. His hand found the wall beside him. He thought about 23 years. He thought about trust given so long it had stopped being trust and become something more like gravity, invisible. Unquestioned, just the way things worked. He thought about his mother in that room tonight. Throwing soup, finger-pointing, voice cracking. Someone in this house is poisoning me. And Walter, steady, patient, unmoved. She needs to rest. The door opened. Amelia stepped out and stopped when she saw him. She looked at his face and read it fast, the way she read everything. How long have you been there? She said quietly. Long enough, he said. He looked older than he had last night, or maybe just truer. The polished gravity of the Caldwell name was still on him, the set of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, but underneath it right now, he just looked like a man who had made a mistake and knew it and was not going to let it sit. What did you find in my kitchen? He said. Containers on the back shelf that don't belong there, she said. Wrong maker, wrong labels, wrong smell. She looked at him. I need to know who has access to that shelf specifically. Not the household staff, specifically. Walter manages the inventory personally, Nathaniel said. The words came out flat, like he was hearing them for the first time. Does any other staff member have access to those shelves without him knowing? No, he said. He stopped. He prides himself on it. Says a well-run house runs on one person knowing where everything is. Amelia nodded slowly. I need to look at your account books, she said. The household supply records. Deliveries, invoices, expenditures for the past 18 months. Those are Walter's domain. I know whose domain they are, she said. Do you have access? A pause. He was working through something. She could see it, the systematic dismantling of a trust so complete it had become invisible. Yes, he said finally. My father's study. The original records are kept there. Walter maintains his own copies, but the originals, he stopped. My mother insisted the originals stay in my father's study. Walter always thought it was redundant. Amelia looked at him steadily. I'll bet he did, she said. Nathaniel held her gaze. And then something happened that she had not expected. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not breaking, not collapsing, but deciding, the way a man looks when he stops explaining and starts moving. Come to the study, he said. Now, he turned and walked. Amelia followed. Behind them, through the closed door, Margaret Caldwell was on her feet, moving to the window, standing in the morning light for the first time in 4 months. And she looked out at the land that had been her family's for 3 generations, her land. Her legacy, the thing that Walter Whitcomb had been slowly, carefully, invisibly stealing, and she pressed one hand flat against the cold glass. Not anymore, she thought. Not one more day. The study smelled like old leather and pipe tobacco, and the particular kind of silence that collects in rooms where important men have made important decisions for a very long time. Nathaniel went straight to the cabinet behind his father's desk. He had the key on his watch chain, had always carried it. Never thought much about why. His father had pressed it into his hand the week before he died and said, "Keep the originals, son. A man who controls his own records controls his own life." At the time, Nathaniel had thought it was the sentiment of an old man who'd lived too long with distrust. Now he understood it differently. He unlocked the cabinet and pulled out 3 ledger books. Heavy, cloth-bound, the spines worn soft with handling. He set them on the desk in front of Amelia. She opened the first one without ceremony and started reading. Not skimming, reading. Her finger moving down columns of figures the way a person reads a letter from someone they're trying to understand, slow. Careful, not missing anything. Nathaniel stood across the desk and watched her face. "What am I looking for?" he asked. "Patterns," she said. Without looking up. Deliveries that repeat on odd schedules. Suppliers that don't show up anywhere else in the records. Line items that are vague where everything else is specific. She turned a page. "Your mother said she'd been asking about certain figures for over a year." "Do you know which ones?" "She mentioned the supply invoices for the kitchen," he said. "She thought the quantities were off." "Off how?" "She said we were paying for more than we were receiving." He paused. Walter told her she was misreading the ledger format. That the columns were reorganized 2 years ago and she wasn't accounting for the new structure. Amelia looked up. "And she accepted that?" she said. He stopped. Something crossed his face. She pushed back several times. Walter brought in the delivery records and walked her through them line by line. She still felt something was wrong, but she couldn't point to a specific number and say, "There. That one." So eventually he exhaled. She went quiet about it. And then she started refusing food. And then the doctors came. And after that, nobody was asking about ledger columns anymore. Amelia looked at him for a moment. "That's a very convenient sequence," she said. The words landed quietly. But they landed. Nathaniel pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He leaned forward with his elbows on the desk and looked at the ledger between them. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Caldwell House, he looked less like a man in charge of something and more like a man trying to get a grip on something that had been sliding away from him for a long time. "Show me what you find," he said. "Whatever it is." He nodded and went back to reading. The clock on the mantel ticked. The early morning light moved across the floor. And Amelia turned pages, and Nathaniel watched her face and learned to read her silences, the slight tension around her eyes when something snagged her attention. The way her finger paused and then backed up a line. The almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw when she found something she didn't like. She found the first one 20 minutes in. "Here," she said. She turned the ledger to face him and pointed at a line item midway down a page dated 14 months ago. He leaned over to read it. "Medicinal herb supply, Whitmore & Sons. Richmond recurring quarterly ref. Household wellness account." "It's a pharmacy supplier," he said slowly. "Is it listed anywhere else in the records?" He took the ledger and flipped back. Then forward. Then pulled the second book and checked the index. "No," he said, "just this entry." And he found it. Here, 3 months later. Same supplier, same account reference. And again here. He looked up. 4 times over the past 14 months. "What's the household wellness account?" Amelia asked. "It's for medical supplies. Bandages, basic medicines. Things the staff might need." He looked at the figures. "These amounts are—" He stopped. "These are not bandages." "No," she said. "They're not." She pulled the ledger back and looked at the entry again. "Whitmore & Sons in Richmond, do you know them?" "By name." "They supply some of the larger estates in the county. They deal in bulk medicinal goods, some specialty compounds." "Specialty compounds," Amelia repeated. The words sat between them. Nathaniel looked at her. She looked at the ledger, and the thing that neither of them was saying filled the room like smoke. He was the one who said it first. If someone wanted to introduce something into a person's food supply gradually, he said, his voice very controlled. Over months, the kind of thing that made a person sick slowly enough that it looked like age. Looked like decline. Would it be traceable? Amelia was quiet for a moment. Depends on what it was, she said. Some things leave a taste. A smell. A bitterness that the person eating notices even if they can't identify it. She met his eyes. Your mother noticed it. The doctors didn't test for it, he said. The doctors were treating symptoms, she said, not looking for causes, because Walter told them she was confused. Yes. The single word was a door slamming shut. Nathaniel stood up abruptly, not in anger, or not only in anger. In the contained, cold way of a man who has just seen to the shape of something and needs to be upright to face it. He walked to the window, put one hand on the frame. 23 years, he said, I know. My father trusted him. I trusted him. My mother, he stopped. His hand pressed harder against the frame. My mother tried to tell me. She tried to tell me for a year, and you believed what made sense, Amelia said. Not softly, not gently, just factually. A man who has served your family faithfully for 23 years. Explaining away an elderly woman's concerns in a way that was plausible and kind. That's not stupidity, Mr. Caldwell. That's exactly how it's supposed to work. He turned around. That doesn't make it right, he said. No, she agreed. It doesn't. He came back to the desk, stood over the ledger. Looked at the line entries with an expression that was somewhere between grief and fury, the particular expression of a man dismantling something he built on the wrong foundation. What do we do, he said. We need what's in those containers, she said. Without Walter knowing we have it. And we need someone who can identify the content, someone with medical or pharmaceutical knowledge who is not connected to this household. She paused. Is there a doctor in the county you trust independently? Not one, Walter called in. Nathaniel thought doctor. Renshaw in Millhaven. He treated my father in the early years. Before father switched to the physicians Walter recommended. He and Walter have no relationship. Can you get to him today without Walter knowing where you're going? Yes. I have estate business east of here. It's a plausible reason to ride that direction. Then go, she said. This morning. Tell him I need a professional opinion on a substance that I believe is being added to food. Tell him, she paused. Tell him it's urgent, but don't tell him more than that yet. And bring him here tomorrow if he'll come. And tonight? Nathaniel said. Tonight I need 5 minutes alone with that shelf, she said. And I need to not be interrupted. I'll keep Walter occupied, Nathaniel said immediately. Then he'll notice if I'm too deliberate about it. Then don't be deliberate, she said. Just go over the quarterly ledger with him after dinner. Ask him to walk you through the supply accounts. Tell him you want to be more involved in the household finances. She looked at him. Men like Walter can't resist an invitation to explain things. Especially to people they think they've already convinced. Nathaniel looked at her. Really looked at her, not the way he'd looked at her last night on his doorstep. Not with urgency and desperation, but with something slower and more considered. Like he was recalibrating something. You've dealt with men like Walter before, he said. It wasn't quite a question. Amelia closed the ledger. I've dealt with men who believe their own story so completely that the truth doesn't scare them anymore, she said. Yes, she stood up. I need to get back before the kitchen staff arrives. If I'm absent from the kitchen this morning, someone will mention it to Walter. She picked up her pack and moved toward the door. Miss Hartwell, he said. Thank you, he said. For believing her. She turned halfway. She wasn't hard to believe, she said. She was just saying true things to people who'd decided they already knew the answer. A beat. That's the easiest thing in the world to fix. You just have to actually listen. She left. And Nathaniel Caldwell stood alone in his father's study with 3 ledger books and the wreckage of 23 years of misplaced trust. And he let himself be angry, really angry, the deep cold kind that didn't shout but that moved for exactly 60 seconds. Then he picked up his coat. He had a ride to make. The sun was barely up. Rosa was already in the kitchen when Amelia got back, stoking the stove and setting out the breakfast preparations. and she looked up quickly when Amelia came through the door, a look that was curious and a little cautious, and something else underneath that Amelia filed away for later. "Morning," Amelia said. "Morning, Miss Hartwell." Rosa's eyes moved to the pack on her shoulder. "Were you out already, early riser?" Amelia said simply. She set her pack on the work table and began pulling things out, not making a show of it, but not hiding it either. "I like to get the lay of a kitchen before I really start in on it." Old habit. Rosa watched her. "Mr. Whitcomb usually has the morning setup done by the time I arrive," she said carefully. "Is he here yet?" "No, ma'am. He comes down at 6. Amelia checked the clock on the wall. 14 minutes, she said. "How long have you worked here?" "Going on 2 years." "Ma'am, and you prepare some of Mrs. Caldwell's meals?" A pause. "Just a beat too long, sometimes," Rosa said. "When Miss Whitcomb asks me to, what does he ask you to add to her food?" Rosa's face went careful. Not guilty careful. There was a difference, and Amelia knew it. "He has a specific set of instructions for her meals," Rosa said. "Because of her condition. He says the doctor recommended certain additions to help with her appetite and her nerves." "What kind of additions?" Rosa looked at the doorway. Then back at Amelia, she said quietly. "He measures it himself and gives it to me to add to her broth or her tea. He says it's medicinal. Since I started." "Ma'am, so going on 2 years," Amelia kept her voice completely even. "Has Mrs. Caldwell ever refused the broth after you added it?" she asked. Rosa was quiet for 3 full seconds every time she said, "These past 8 months. She stops eating after 1 sip. She used to just push the bowl away, but lately Rosa stopped. She was young, no older than 20, and she had the look of someone carrying information she hadn't known was heavy until right now. She told me once it tasted wrong. I told Mr. Whitcomb and he said it was a symptom. That the medicine sometimes altered the taste to patients who were confused. And you believed him," Amelia said. "He's been here 23 years, Rosa said. He knows everything about this house." "Why would I stopped?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Is she as Mrs. Caldwell?" "She ate this morning," Amelia said. "From food I brought myself. She ate well." She held Rosa's eyes. "I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it without telling Mr. Whitcomb." Rosa's face was pale now, but her chin came up. "What do you need?" she said. "Next time he gives you a powder for Mrs. Caldwell's food," Amelia said, "I need you to put it in your apron pocket instead of her bowl. Don't pour it out. Don't put it anywhere else. Just keep it separate and give it to me. And if he asks—" "You added it just like always," Amelia said. "He won't know the difference until Mrs. Caldwell stops refusing her food." And I paused. "By then we won't need to worry about what Mr. Whitcomb knows." Rosa looked at her for a long moment. "You're going to prove it," the girl said. "Not a question." "I'm going to try," Amelia said. A small nod. Firm and decisive. The nod of someone who has been uncomfortable for a long time and is relieved to be asked to do something about it. "He gives me the powder before lunch service," Rosa said. "Today," Amelia held her gaze. "Then today we start," she said. The clock read 5:58. 2 minutes. She was at the stove when Walter Whitcomb walked through the door. He stopped when he saw her, then recovered fast. Smooth, professional. He moved into the kitchen with his usual measured authority, eyes sweeping the room in that quick inventory way he had. "Cataloging everything, Miss Hartwell," he said. "You're an early riser. Always have been," she said cheerfully. "Bakery hours don't allow for sleeping in. How did you find the kitchen?" "Excellent setup," she said. "You run a tight operation, Mr. Whitcomb. Everything exactly where it should be." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "I did notice one thing, though." Walter went very still. Imperceptible to someone who wasn't watching for it. But Amelia was always watching. "Oh," he said. "The stove runs a little hot on the left side," she said. "The bread I'll be making for Mrs. Caldwell needs an even temperature. So I'll need to adjust my timing. Small thing, but I wanted to mention it." Walter's stillness released. "Barely, of course," he said smoothly. "I'll have it looked at. No need to make a fuss, she said. I've worked around worse. She turned back to the stove. I'll be making Mrs. Caldwell's meals myself going forward. I'll let Rosa handle the household meals. She seems quite capable. That's rather irregular, Walter said. The kitchen operates according to a specific Mr. Caldwell approved it last night, Amelia said pleasantly. He was very clear about it. I'm sure he'd be happy to confirm if you'd like to ask him. A silence. Of course, Walter said. His voice was the same. His posture was the same. His expression was the same, but he didn't go near the back shelf. Not once in the entire time he spent in the kitchen that morning. He watched her. She could feel it, that patient, calculating attention at her back. But he didn't make a move. He redirected Rosa twice to tasks across the kitchen. He asked Amelia 3 questions about her bakery experience. Each one phrased as friendly curiosity, each one positioned to gauge exactly how much she knew and how much she was guessing. She gave him answers that were truthful and completely useless to him. When he left to see to the household accounts, she exhaled. Rosa looked at her from across the room. Amelia gave her the smallest nod. Rosa turned back to the stove, and so the morning moved, with both of them keeping their faces easy and their knowledge hidden. In a kitchen that smelled like bread and something bitter underneath. While the man who had run this house for 23 years went about his morning with the confidence of someone who had no idea that 2 women, one rich and one poor, one in a bedroom upstairs and one at a stove, had just decided to take him apart. By mid-morning, Amelia had found 2 more things. She found them while reorganizing the lower pantry shelves, a legitimate task she'd announced loudly before she started. Making sure Walter's assistant heard her. Behind a row of preserved vegetables, pushed to the back, she found a small leather-bound notebook. The kind a man used for personal accounting. She opened it and read 2 pages before she closed it again and put it exactly back where she'd found it. She did not take it. Not yet. She went upstairs to Margaret's room and knocked. Come in. Margaret was dressed, fully dressed, sitting at her writing desk with a cup of tea one Amelia had sent up from her own supply and a piece of paper in front of her that she'd been writing on. She looked up when Amelia entered, and something in her face said that she'd been waiting. I need to tell you something, Amelia said, and some of it you're not going to like. I've been not liking things for 6 months, Margaret said. Sit down, Amelia sat. She told her about Rosa and the powder. She told her about the ledger entries. She told her about the notebook in the pantry, not the contents. Just its existence. Margaret listened without interrupting. Her face went through several things: fury and grief and a terrible, vindicated recognition, and she held all of them with the same composure. When Amelia finished, she was quiet for a moment. 2 years, Margaret said. At least, Amelia said. Rosa has been here 2 years, and it was already established when she arrived. It could be longer. Margaret looked at her writing paper. I started feeling ill 3 years ago, she said. I thought it was grief. My husband had just passed. I thought she stopped. He died 14 months after Walter changed his medicine suppliers. I remember because I asked about the change, and Walter said the previous pharmacy had closed. She looked up slowly. Amelia held her gaze. I don't know yet, she said. The silence in the room was enormous. If he did something to my husband, Margaret said. Very quietly. We don't know that yet, Amelia said. We need proof before we go anywhere near that question. We need the powder Rosa's going to save for me. We need Dr. Renshaw to look at the containers. And we need what's in that notebook. She leaned forward. Mrs. Caldwell, I need you to be patient for a little longer. I need you to keep eating, keep getting stronger, and keep letting Walter believe that nothing has changed. She paused. Can you do that? Margaret looked at her hands, then at the letter she'd been writing. Who is this Dr. Renshaw? She asked. A doctor your husband used before the switch, Amelia said. Nathaniel trusts him. He's riding to fetch him now. Good. Margaret folded the letter carefully. Then I will be patient, she looked up. But Miss Hartwell, when the time comes. When you have everything you need. I want to be in the room, yes. Ma'am, I'm counting on it. She stood to leave. Amelia, Margaret said. She turned the powder, Margaret said. In my food. Her voice was absolutely level. I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. Every time I ate, I felt it taking something from me. And when I stopped eating, I started to feel less like I was disappearing. She met Amelia's eyes. I thought I was imagining it, because everyone told me I was imagining it. But my body knew. Your body was right, Amelia said. Yes, Margaret's jaw set, it was. The afternoon passed in the particular tension of two people keeping secrets in a house full of observation. Amelia worked in the kitchen. Walter circulated through the house. Rosa moved between them like a careful bridge, her face giving nothing away, which was remarkable. Amelia thought for a girl of 20. At noon, Walter came to the kitchen with the powder. Amelia was there to see it. She was at the stove with her back half turned. But she watched in her peripheral vision as Walter produced a small paper packet from his vest pocket and handed it to Rosa with his usual quiet instructions. Rosa took it and nodded. Walter looked at Amelia once, a look that lasted half a second, and communicated nothing and left. Rosa waited until his footsteps faded. Then she crossed the kitchen and pressed the paper packet into Amelia's palm. Amelia closed her hand around it without looking down. Well done, she said very quietly. Rosa exhaled. I feel sick, she whispered. You're doing the right thing, Amelia said. Go make the broth. Make it without anything added and take it up to her. If Walter asks, it went in. What if she'll drink it, Amelia said. She's expecting it. I told her this morning. Rosa nodded and turned back to the stove. And Amelia walked casually to the pantry, ostensibly to check her supply inventory, and stood for a moment with the paper packet in her hand. She opened it carefully. Fine powder, off-white. Faint smell, there it was. Underneath the neutral surface, that back-of-the-nose bitterness. That wrong note that Margaret's body had been recognizing and rejecting for months while everyone around her insisted she was confused. She folded the packet closed and put it in her apron pocket. Then she went back to the stove and finished her bread and said nothing to anyone. And her hands were steady because she had learned a long time ago that the time to fall apart was after, not during. Nathaniel came back at 4 in the afternoon. She heard him in the entrance hall, heard his voice, and then Walter's. The smooth exchange of a household manager receiving his employer back from an outing. She stayed in the kitchen and let him come to her, which he did 20 minutes later, enough time to make the conversation with Walter look natural, not rushed. He appeared in the kitchen doorway and looked at her with an expression she was beginning to read. Renshaw will come tomorrow, he said, under the noise of Rosa working at the sink. He stopped. He wasn't surprised, Amelia. When I described the situation, he wasn't surprised. She looked at him. What did he say? He said he'd had questions about my father's final illness that he was never given satisfactory answers to. Nathaniel's voice was controlled, but barely. He said he raised concerns at the time and was told he was being overcautious. By Walter. The kitchen was very quiet except for the water running in the sink. He's coming at 9, Nathaniel said, through the east gate. Walter won't see him arrive. Amelia reached into her apron pocket and held out the folded paper packet. Nathaniel looked at it. Is this what was going in her food, he said. Yes. He took it, held it for a moment. Something moved across his face, something that wasn't anger exactly, or grief exactly, but that had the weight of both. I have a ledger entry for a pharmacy supplier in Richmond, he said quietly. 14 months of payments to a company called Whitmore and Sons. Medicinal compounds. I know, she said. I found the same entries. There's more. He looked at her. I went through the rest of the books on the ride home. There are livestock purchase records that don't match our actual holdings. Lumber deliveries for repairs that were never made. I've been paying, he stopped. Walter has been billing me for a farm I'm apparently running and a house I'm apparently maintaining that exist only in his ledger columns. She held his gaze. How much? Thousands, he said. Over 4 years. Possibly more if I go back further. His jaw tightened. He's been bleeding this estate for years and using the household account structures to hide it. And when my mother started noticing discrepancies, he needed her out of the way, Amelia said. He needed her discredited, Nathaniel said. An old woman losing her mind is easy to dismiss. An old woman who can look you in the eye and tell you which line items are wrong, that's a problem. The water at the sink turned off. Rosa dried her hands without turning around. The three of them stood in the kitchen with the shape of it, the full, terrible shape of it, finally visible in the air between them. Tomorrow, Amelia said, we get Renshaw in. We get the containers tested. And then she looked at Nathaniel. Then we bring Walter Whitcomb into a room and we close the door. Nathaniel looked at her. And my mother, he said. Your mother, Amelia said, will be standing on her own 2 feet by then. He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded once, slow, with the full weight of a man who was finally moving in the right direction after a very long time of standing still. Miss Hartwell, he said. Amelia, she said at this point. Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile, but something that had the bones of one. Amelia, he said, how do you do this? Walk into a house you've never been in, full of people you've never met, and see what everyone else has been standing too close to see. She picked up her breadcloth and started folding it. I spent my whole life, she said, being the kind of person that people like Walter Whitcomb don't consider a threat. She smoothed the cloth against the table. People like him only watch the doors that matter to them. Servants' entrances don't count. Poor women with flour on their hands don't count. She looked up. So I see everything, because nobody thinks to look back. Nathaniel was quiet. Outside in the corridor, they both heard it at the same time, the particular measured footfall of Walter Whitcomb returning from the east wing. Nathaniel straightened. His face rearranged itself into the expression of a man having a routine conversation with his kitchen help. Amelia turned back to the stove. Walter appeared in the doorway. He looked at both of them, at the perfectly ordinary scene, employer and hired help. Nothing remarkable. His eyes moved to the stove, to the sink, to the shelves. Everything going well, he asked. Very well, Nathaniel said. Miss Hartwell was just explaining the adjustments she's making to my mother's meal schedule. The results this morning were encouraging. So I heard, Walter said. He looked to Caldwell ate well? She did, Amelia said. I think she just needed something simpler, less rich. Old stomachs can be particular, indeed, Walter said. He stood in the doorway for 3 seconds longer than necessary. Then he nodded, pleasant and professional, and left. Rosa didn't move. Nathaniel didn't move. Amelia stirred the pot on the stove and said nothing, and listened to Walter's footsteps move down the corridor and up the stairs, and counted to 12 before she exhaled. He knows something's changed, Nathaniel said very quietly. Yes, she said. How long do we have? She considered. He'll be careful tonight, she said. He'll watch. He won't move yet because he doesn't know what we have. But by tomorrow, she looked at him. Renshaw needs to confirm the substance before noon. After that, we move fast. And if he tries to remove something from the kitchen before then, Amelia reached into her apron pocket. She set something on the counter beside the stove, small, flat, wrapped in cloth. Nathaniel leaned close and looked. It was the leather-bound notebook from the pantry. I moved it this afternoon, she said calmly, while he was in the east wing. Nathaniel stared at it. He'll look for that, he said. I know, she said. Which means by tomorrow morning he'll know for certain that someone's been in that pantry. She met his eyes. So we have until morning. She picked up the notebook and held it out to him. Read it tonight, she said. All of it, and lock it in your father's cabinet with the ledgers. He took it. Their hands were close for a moment, not touching, but close. And in that small space between them was the particular gravity of two people who have moved too fast through something dangerous together and have come out on the same side of it, and are only now beginning to understand what that means. He pulled back first. Tonight, he said. Tonight, she agreed. And upstairs, in a room with a locked door and a cup of real tea, and the first real meal she'd had in months, sitting settled and warm in her stomach. Margaret Caldwell was writing. Not a letter, a list. Every financial irregularity she had noticed over 3 years. Every question she had raised and been deflected from. Every number that hadn't matched. Every delivery she hadn't recognized. Every quiet redirect from a man she had trusted because her husband had trusted him. 3 pages, then 4, then 5. Her handwriting was small and precise and absolutely steady. And when she finished, she folded the pages and held them in her lap and looked out at the night coming down over the land that had belonged to her family for 60 years. Not one more day, she had thought that morning. She thought it again now. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like a promise she was about to keep. Dr. Renshaw arrived at 9 in the morning through the east gate. Exactly as planned, on a gray horse with mud on its legs and a black medical bag strapped behind the saddle. He was older than Amelia had expected, past 70. With white hair and the careful movements of a man who had learned to be deliberate with his body. But his eyes were sharp and his handshake was firm. And when Nathaniel introduced him to Amelia in the back corridor, the first thing he said was not hello. The first thing he said was, "Show me what you found." She liked him immediately. She took him to the kitchen while Nathaniel kept watch at the corridor entrance. Rosa had been sent to the upper floors on a household errand. Amelia had arranged it quietly at breakfast, giving her a list of tasks specific enough to keep her busy for an hour. Walter was in his office reviewing the morning accounts. His door was closed, which in Amelia's reading of this house meant he was either genuinely absorbed or deliberately making himself look absorbed. Either way, they had a window. She brought the containers down from the back shelf one at a time, setting them on the work table in front of Renshaw. He opened each one in sequence, leaning close, breathing in, then pulling back with the controlled expression of a man who is confirming something he already suspected. On the third container he stopped. He held it under his nose for a long moment. Then he set it down and looked at Amelia and said, very quietly, "Where did you?" "Where? Back shelf," she said. Separated from the household supply. Different maker than the rest. Handwritten labels. And this has been accessible to whoever prepares Mrs. Caldwell's meals. The household manager controls this section of the kitchen personally, she said. And I have a witness who was given a measured amount of this. She produced the folded paper packet from her apron pocket and instructed to add it to Mrs. Caldwell's broth. For 2 years. Renshaw took the packet, opened it, looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "This is antimony." The word landed in the kitchen like a stone dropped into still water. Amelia had heard the word before, knew enough to know what it meant. But hearing it spoken aloud, in this kitchen, in this house, by a doctor holding a packet of powder that had been going into an old woman's food for 2 years, it hit differently than knowing. "Are you certain?" she said. "I treated a case of antimony poisoning 30 years ago," Renshaw said. "A mining accident." The presentation was distinctive. He set the packet down. "In small doses over time it causes appetite loss, nausea, profound weakness. The patient experiences a bitter taste they can't identify. Progressive decline that mimics age-related deterioration." He looked at her. "It is very difficult to distinguish from natural decline without specifically testing for it. Would a standard physician examination catch it?" she asked. "Not unless the physician was specifically looking," he said. "And had reason to be." He paused. "I was not given reason to look when I treated Mr. Caldwell Sr. I was called in for what appeared to be a cardiac episode. I raised questions about the symptom progression and was told that you were overcautious," Amelia said. Renshaw looked at her. "Walter Whitcomb told you that," she said. "Nathaniel told me, yes," Renshaw said. "He did." He was quiet for a moment. Something moved across his face, not guilt exactly, but the shadow of it. The kind a man carries when he didn't do wrong but didn't do right either, and has been living with the weight of the difference. "I should have pushed harder." "You're here now," Amelia said. He straightened. I need to take samples, he said. The containers and the powder both. I can have confirmation within 24 hours if I ride back to Millhaven today. He looked at her directly. Miss Hartwell, this is a criminal matter, you understand that? She said. I do, and the man responsible has been operating this house for 23 years with the full trust of this family, yes. He will not go quietly. No, she said. He won't. She held his gaze. Which is why I need you to ride hard and come back fast. Because when this breaks open, I want the evidence in hand before he has a chance to explain it away. Renshaw nodded. He began packing samples carefully into his bag, each one wrapped in cloth, labeled in his own handwriting. It was while he was doing this that Amelia heard the footstep. Not a household sound. Not Rosa returning or Nathaniel shifting his weight in the corridor. A single footstep at the kitchen service entrance, the side door that led from the east wing. The door that should have been locked. She moved without thinking. 2 steps to the work table. She picked up the nearest container and slid it casually to the far side of the table. Putting her body between it and the door opened. Walter Whitcomb stood in the frame. He looked at the room. At Renshaw. At the medical bag on the table. His face did the thing it always did, composed, pleasant. Utterly controlled. But his eyes moved fast, faster than the rest of him. Cataloging in an instant exactly what he was looking at and what it meant. Mr. Whitcomb, Amelia said before he could speak. This is Dr. Renshaw. He's an old friend of the family, Mr. Caldwell asked him to stop by and look in on Mrs. Caldwell. I wasn't informed of a visit, Walter said. It was arranged last minute, Amelia said. Mr. Caldwell will be down shortly to take the doctor upstairs. Walter's eyes moved to the table. To the containers, to Renshaw's bag. Are those from the pantry shelf, he said. His voice was perfectly pleasant. The question sounded like nothing. But Amelia felt the room tighten. I was showing Dr. Renshaw the kitchen setup, she said easily. He wanted to understand what Mrs. Caldwell has been eating, given that her appetite has been the central concern. Of course, Walter said. He looked at Renshaw directly. I don't believe we've met, he said. No, Renshaw said. His voice was steady. Whatever he was feeling, it didn't make it to his face. I treated the family some years back. Before I moved my practice to Millhaven, I see, Walter said. Well, welcome back to Caldwell House, Doctor. He looked at the containers on the table one more time. I'll let Mr. Caldwell know you've arrived. He left through the door he'd come in. The room was silent for 3 full seconds. He knows, Renshaw said quietly. He's suspected since last night, Amelia said. She was already moving. Putting the containers back in their places, not because she wanted to preserve the arrangement, but because if Walter came back in the next 5 minutes, she needed the kitchen to look undisturbed. Did you get everything you need? Yes. Then you need to leave now. Don't go out the front. Go back the way you came, East Gate. Through the backfield. She looked at him. Don't stop to speak to anyone in the house. Renshaw picked up his bag. He moved to the service door, paused and turned back. Miss Hartwell, he said, when I have confirmation, and I will have it, what do you intend to do? I intend to put it in front of Nathaniel Caldwell and let him decide, she said. But I think we both know what he'll decide. Renshaw nodded once and slipped out. Amelia stood alone in the kitchen for 10 seconds. She breathed in, breathed out. Then she untied her apron and walked down the corridor to find Nathaniel. She found him in the entrance hall, already coming toward her, which meant he'd seen Walter and knew something had happened. He was in the kitchen, she said without preamble. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. I saw him go toward the east wing. I couldn't intercept without, it's done, she said. Renshaw got what he needed. He's leaving now. She lowered her voice. But Walter saw the containers on the table. He's not certain what Renshaw took. But he's going to check that shelf within the hour. What do? We let him check it, she said. Everything is back in place. He won't find anything missing. She looked at him steadily. But Nathaniel, he's going to move today. Whatever he was planning to do about this situation, he's going to accelerate it. We need to be faster. Nathaniel looked toward the corridor that led to Walter's office. I want to confront him now, he said. Not yet, she said. Without Renshaw's confirmation, he explains everything away. The containers are kitchen supplies. The ledger entries are legitimate purchases. Rosa imagined being given a powder. She held his gaze. He has 23 years of credibility, and we have 24 hours. We wait, and if he does something in those 24 hours, then we deal with it, she said. But Nathaniel, she paused. Your mother needs to know what's happening. Right now. Today she deserves to know. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. A man working through the geography of a hard conversation. I'll go up, he said. Go now, she said. I'll watch the kitchen, he went. She went back to the stove and put the kettle on, and stood there with her hand on the iron handle, and let herself feel for just a moment. Just 30 seconds how afraid she was. Not for herself. For the girl upstairs who had been slowly poisoned in her own home. For the old man who had died and whose death nobody had questioned, because the right people had been trusted to question it. For Rosa, who was 20 years old and had been an unwitting instrument in something she hadn't understood. 30 seconds. Then she straightened her back and picked up her spoon. She had bread to make. Upstairs, the conversation Nathaniel had with his mother lasted 40 minutes. She knew because she counted not obsessively, but the way a person counts when they're waiting on something that matters. She heard nothing from above, no raised voices, no footsteps in the corridor. Just the house and the clock and the sound of the stove. Rosa came back from the upper floors at 10:30 and stopped in the kitchen doorway when she saw Amelia's face. What happened? Rosa said immediately. Whitcomb came into the kitchen while the doctor was here, Amelia said. Rosa went pale. The doctor got out safely, Amelia said. But Rosa listened to me carefully. She kept her voice low and even. Today is going to be difficult. Whatever Walter asks you to do, do it normally. Don't avoid him, don't watch him. Just be Rosa doing her job. Can you do that? Yes, Rosa said, but her hands were clasped tight in front of her. You're doing the right thing, Amelia said. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. But you are. I gave her that powder every day for 2 years, Rosa said. Her voice had something broken in it. I thought it was medicine. I thought I was helping her. You were told it was medicine by a man you had every reason to trust, Amelia said. That is not your fault, you understand me? That is not yours. Rosa pressed her lips together and nodded. Her eyes were bright, but she didn't cry, and Amelia thought, not for the first time, that this girl had more spine than people gave her credit for. Go start the lunch preparations, Amelia said. Normal as any other day, Rosa went. Walter appeared at 11. He came into the kitchen with his usual measured step and his usual pleasant expression. And he stood at the work table and watched Rosa work for a moment, before he turned to Amelia. Mrs. Caldwell's noon meal, he said. I'll prepare the supplement myself today. I want to ensure it's consistent. Amelia looked at him. I've been managing her meals since I arrived, she said pleasantly. Mr. Caldwell asked me to maintain that arrangement. Of course, Walter said. But the medicinal supplement is a matter of ongoing treatment. It's separate from the food preparation itself. What supplement? Amelia said. A pause. Mrs. Caldwell has been receiving a mild digestive aid, Walter said. Prescribed some time ago. It's added to her broth. I wasn't told about any prescription, Amelia said. Do you have the original physician's order? The question was simple. Quiet, reasonable, and Walter Whitcomb, for the first time in Amelia's observation of him, did not answer immediately. It lasted only a second. Then the records are in the household medical file. I can retrieve them. That would be helpful, Amelia said. I'd want to review anything being added to her food. Given that she's been refusing meals, sometimes digestive aids can cause aversion in sensitive patients. I'll have the file brought down, Walter said. He left. Rosa didn't look up from the sink. Amelia continued stirring the pot on the stove. There was no physician's order. They both knew it. And Walter knew that she knew it. And the kitchen existed in that shared knowledge for the rest of the morning like a room with a fire, starting in the wall not visible yet, but present and getting hotter. The file never came. At 11:30, Walter sent a message through his assistant that the medical records were being located and would be provided later in the day. His assistant was a young man named Croft who had the look of someone uncomfortable with the message he was delivering, which told Amelia something about the atmosphere in Walter's office that morning. At noon, Nathaniel came downstairs. He came to the kitchen first, not the dining room. He looked at Amelia and said, "Without ceremony, she wants to see you now," he said. She stopped, pressed his mouth together for a moment. She took it differently than I expected. "How do you mean?" "I expected anger," he said. "Or grief." She was very still. She listened to everything, and then she asked me 3 questions about the ledgers and told me which suppliers she'd been trying to investigate for 14 months. He looked at Amelia. She already knew most of it. She just couldn't prove any of it from a bed. "She's been building a case," Amelia said. "She has 5 pages of notes," Nathaniel said. "She's been writing all morning." Amelia untied her apron. "Watch the kitchen," she said. She went upstairs. Margaret was at her writing desk, exactly as Nathaniel had described, but she stood when Amelia came in and the standing mattered. She was steadier than yesterday, taller somehow. Less like a woman who had been lying down for months and more like a woman who had been compressed for months and was beginning to take up her proper space again. "Sit," Margaret said. Amelia sat. "The antimony," Margaret said. "Renshaw is certain?" "Certain enough to stake his professional reputation on it," Amelia said. "He'll have laboratory confirmation by tomorrow morning." "My husband's illness," Margaret said. 14 months, the cardiac episode that killed him. Renshaw had questions that were dismissed, yes. If my husband was also stopped. Her hands were flat on the desk. If he was also being poisoned. Then Walter didn't just want me discredited. He wanted us both gone. That's what the evidence suggests, Amelia said quietly. I want to be careful about saying anything we can't prove yet. I understand caution, Margaret said. I'm not asking for certainty. I'm asking what you believe. She looked at Amelia directly. What do you believe? A moment of silence. I believe, Amelia said slowly, that a man who is embezzling thousands of dollars from an estate needs the people who can identify that embezzlement to either be discredited or be gone. I believe your husband was sharp enough and healthy enough to have caught it. I believe you were sharp enough to have caught it after him. She paused. And I believe a man who has operated this carefully for this long does not do things by accident. Margaret was absolutely still. He killed my husband, she said. Not a question this time. I think it's possible, Amelia said. Renshaw will know more when he has the confirmation. Margaret looked at her hands for a long moment. Then she opened her desk drawer and took out the 5 pages she'd been writing. She handed them to Amelia. Everything I remember, she said. Every figure that didn't match, every delivery I couldn't account for. Every conversation where Walter redirected me. It goes back further than 3 years. Much further. She looked at Amelia. I was a fool you were trusting, Amelia said. With my experience, those should not be the same thing, Margaret said. Amelia looked at the 5 pages, dense, careful handwriting. Dates first, names of suppliers, specific invoice references. This was not the confused rambling of a woman losing her grip. This was the systematic record of someone who had been paying attention for years. This is extraordinary, Amelia said. It's the least I could do, Margaret said. For my husband. Her voice stayed level. What happens when Renshaw comes back tomorrow? We confront Walter. With all of it, the powder, the containers, the ledger entries. Renshaw's confirmation. Amelia met her eyes. And we make sure there's no way he talks his way out. He will try, Margaret said. Yes, ma'am, he will. Then I want to be there, Margaret said. I told Nathaniel the same thing. I will not be in my room while that man is confronted in my house. This is my house. These were my accounts he stole from. This was my husband. Her voice didn't rise, it dropped instead, which was somehow more powerful. "I want to be standing in that room." Looking him in the eye. "Yes, ma'am," Amelia said. "I want that too." She was back in the kitchen by 1 o'clock, and it was Rosa who found her there, breathless, having come down the back stairs at something close to a run. "He's in the pantry," Rosa said. "Walter. He's been in there for 20 minutes. Amelia was moving before Rosa finished the sentence. She didn't run. Running attracted attention. She walked fast and steady, and when she reached the pantry door, she pushed it open without knocking. Walter was crouched at the lower shelves, the exact spot where Amelia had found the leather notebook 2 days ago. He had the shelves pulled forward, looking behind the row of preserved vegetables. His back was to the door, but he heard her and straightened immediately, turning with an expression that was composed and unsurprised and absolutely opaque. "Miss Hartwell," he said. "Mr. Whitcomb," she said. "Can I help you find something?" "Inventory check," he said smoothly. "I do them regularly. Part of maintaining a well-run house." He looked at her steadily. She looked back. The notebook was in Nathaniel's father's cabinet, locked with the ledger books. Walter could search every inch of this pantry and find nothing. She knew that, and the fact that he was searching told her exactly how worried he was. "Of course," she said pleasantly. "Let me know if you need help reorganizing. I've been meaning to go through the lower shelves myself." Something flickered in his eyes. "Gone instantly. That won't be necessary," he said. "I have everything in hand." "I'm sure you do," she said. She turned and walked back to the kitchen. Her heart was going at twice its normal pace, but her hands were steady and her face was easy, and she stood at the stove and kept going because there was nothing else to do. At 3 o'clock, Walter Whitcomb did something he had not done in 23 years. He asked for the afternoon off. He sent Croft to deliver the message to Nathaniel, a personal matter requiring his attention in town. He would return by evening. Professional, polite, completely normal sounding. Nathaniel came straight to Amelia. "He's going to the pharmacy in town," Amelia said. "Or somewhere he can make contact. He's going to cover tracks." "Should I stop him?" "No," she said. "If you stop him without evidence in hand, he lawyers his way out before Renshaw even gets back. Let him go." She looked at him. "But send someone after him. Not a servant, someone from town you trust. Someone who can tell us where he went and who he spoke to." Nathaniel thought for 5 seconds. "Caleb Pruitt's oldest boy. He's 17 and he knows this county better than anyone. Walter doesn't know his face." "Send him now," Amelia said. Nathaniel went to send a rider. The house was quieter without Walter in it. Not peaceful, the opposite of peaceful. The loaded quiet of a place holding its breath. Rosa moved through her afternoon tasks with the careful efficiency of someone concentrating on not thinking too hard. Nathaniel came and went from the study, cross-referencing ledger entries, making notes, and Amelia cooked Margaret's dinner. Simple and clean, and the household meal, and thought about antimony and notebooks, and the careful architecture of a 23-year deception. Walter came back at 6. He was composed. He had been composed every moment Amelia had observed him. But there was something different now, something pulled slightly tighter. The way a person looks when they've made a decision and are carrying it. She noticed. Nathaniel noticed too. She could see it in the way his eyes tracked Walter across the entrance hall when he returned. That new sharpened attention that had replaced the old blind trust. At dinner, Walter was as smooth and professional as always, overseeing the household service, speaking with Nathaniel about estate matters in his usual measured way. But twice during the meal, Amelia caught him looking at her from the doorway to the dining room. Not long looks. Just quick assessments, the look of a man calculating a timeline. The writer came back at 8. Nathaniel brought her the report in the kitchen, and his face told her most of it before he said the words. "Whitmore and Sons," he said. "The pharmacy in Richmond." Walter sent a telegram. To whom? The writer couldn't get close enough to read it, Nathaniel said. But he saw Walter go into the telegraph office and come out 12 minutes later. He paused. He also stopped at the county land office. Amelia went still. Why would he go to the land office, she said. I don't know, Nathaniel said. But the writer said he was in there for 40 minutes. Long enough to review records, not just drop something off. Amelia looked at him. Does Walter have any land holdings in this county? She asked. Nathaniel's face went through something. Not that I know of. He stopped. Wait. He looked at the ledger on the table beside him, the one he'd been working through all afternoon. There are property transfer records in here for a parcel east of the main estate. 3 years ago, I didn't recognize the purchaser's name. I assumed it was a neighboring estate transaction. He opened the ledger and found the page. The name on the transfer record was Whitmore, the same Whitmore as the pharmacy. Amelia looked at it. He's been buying land, she said. With your money, in a name connected to his supplier. She traced the entry with one finger. This is not just embezzlement, Nathaniel. This is a parallel estate. He's been building a second life with your family's money for years. The silence that followed was the kind that changes things. Nathaniel sat very still. His hand was flat on the ledger. His jaw was set and his eyes had gone somewhere cold and clear that Amelia had not seen in them before. He's planning to run, Nathaniel said. The telegram, she said. The land office. Yes, I think he knows we're moving and he's deciding whether to stay and fight or disappear. She looked at him directly. Nathaniel, if he disappears tonight, he won't, Nathaniel said. He stood up. I'll have the east gate watched and the main road. He's not leaving this property tonight. Don't tell him. Don't let him know he's being watched. I know how to post a watch quietly, he said. The authority in his voice was different from the first night she'd met him, less the authority of position and more the authority of a man who has decided. I grew up on this land. I know every way off it. He looked at her. In the morning, when Renshaw comes back, we end this. In the morning, she agreed. He left. Amelia stood in the kitchen for a long moment after he'd gone. The fire in the stove was burning low. The house was settling into its night sounds around her. And she thought about a woman upstairs with 5 pages of careful notes and 23 years of answers she deserved to have. She thought about a doctor riding hard toward Millhaven with samples in his bag and the memory of questions he'd been told not to ask. She thought about Rosa, asleep by now probably, carrying 2 years of unknowing guilt she didn't deserve. She thought about the fact that tomorrow morning everything would break open, and that some of what spilled out would be irreversible, and some of it would be necessary, and some of it would be both at once. She banked the stove for the night. She was halfway up the back stairs when she heard it. A sound from the direction of the east wing. Not a footstep, something else. A drawer opening. The faint, distinctive sound of papers being handled quickly. She stopped. She stood on the 3rd stair and listened. The sound came again, then stopped. Then the quiet creak of a door being closed very carefully, the kind of careful that meant someone didn't want it heard. She went back down the stairs. She crossed the kitchen. She moved down the east corridor in the dark, not running, placing each foot with the practiced quiet of someone who had grown up in a house with thin walls and sleeping children. Walter's office door was closed. The light underneath it was out. She stood in the corridor and listened. Nothing. She tried the door. Locked. She stood there in the dark hallway with her hand on the locked door handle and thought about what a man who was planning to run would need to do in his office at 11 at night with no light on. He would need to take things. Important things. Things that if found by someone else would answer questions he didn't want answered. She turned and went back down the corridor, back up the stairs. Down the hall to Nathaniel's room. She knocked twice. The door opened in under 10 seconds, which told her he hadn't been sleeping either. He's in his office, she said. No light, moving papers. Nathaniel was already dressed. He pushed past her into the corridor. Nathaniel, she said. And her voice stopped him. Don't go in yet. If he's destroying documents, we need to catch him in the act. Not after. He turned back. His expression was controlled but barely. "How long do we wait?" he said. "Until we hear him move to leave," she said. "Then you go in. I'll take the back staircase in case he tries the service exit." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded. They took their positions. The house was dark and quiet around them. Somewhere outside, the man Nathaniel had posted at the east gate was watching the road. Inside, two people stood in separate shadows and listened and waited. 7 minutes passed. Then they heard at the office door. The lock turning. Footsteps moving not toward the main stairs, but toward the East Wing service corridor. Amelia was already moving. She hit the back stairs at the same moment. She heard Nathaniel's voice from the main corridor sharp. "Clear, commanding Walter, one word." The footsteps stopped. She reached the bottom of the back stairs and pushed through the service door into the east corridor, and she saw him, Walter Whitcomb, standing in the corridor with a leather satchel in his hand and his hat already on, and the particular stillness of a man who has just heard the door close behind him. He looked at her. She looked at him, and in the lamplight from the corridor sconce, she saw it just for a moment, just a flash, before the composure came back down like a curtain, the real face. Not the household manager, not the trusted servant. The man underneath, cornered and calculating and completely without remorse. Then Nathaniel appeared at the corridor junction behind him. Walter turned slowly. The three of them stood in the narrow east corridor, with the leather satchel between them. And nobody said anything for a long moment. Then Walter Whitcomb smiled. Not the professional smile, not the patient smile. Something older and colder, and stripped of all the performance that had covered it for 23 years. "Well," he said, "I suppose we'd talk, and upstairs." As if she had heard something through the walls of a house she had built her life around. Margaret Caldwell opened her bedroom door and stood at the top of the stairs. Listening, ready. "Well," Walter said again, his voice carrying that same smooth patience it always carried. As though being caught fleeing at midnight with a packed satchel was simply another household matter requiring management. "This is awkward." Nathaniel didn't move. Amelia didn't move. The corridor held all three of them in a silence that was almost physical in its weight. Then Nathaniel said, "Put the bag down, Walter, not a request." Walter looked at him for a moment, that old assessing look. The one that had been reading Nathaniel Caldwell, since Nathaniel was a boy who needed managing, and then he set the satchel on the floor beside him, with the careful deliberateness of a man who wanted it, understood that he was choosing to comply, not being forced. "This isn't what it looks like," Walter said. "Tell me what it looks like," Nathaniel said. A man who became aware of certain accusations being leveled against him and decided it would be prudent to secure important documents before they could be misrepresented. Walter's voice was measured and reasonable. It was always measured and reasonable. "Miss Hartwell has been in this house for 3 days and has apparently convinced you to question 23 years of faithful service based on antimony," Amelia said. The word hit the corridor like a gunshot. Walter went very still. Not the controlled stillness he usually wore. Something different. Something that in a less composed man would have been a flinch. "I beg your pardon. Antimony," she said again. "In the containers, on the back shelf of your kitchen. In the powder you gave Rosa every morning to add to Mrs. Caldwell's broth." She looked at him steadily. "Doctor Renshaw identified it. He's having it confirmed in Millhaven as we speak." Walter looked at her, then at Nathaniel, then back at her, and then he did something that surprised her. He laughed, not loudly. A quiet, controlled, almost sad laugh, the kind that came from a man who had lived a long time with something and found it almost funny that it had finally surfaced. "Renshaw," he said. "Of course. The overcautious country doctor who spent 20 years second-guessing his betters." He shook his head. "He always did have an overactive imagination. His imagination identified the same compound that's been making Margaret Caldwell refuse food for 8 months, Nathaniel said. His voice was very controlled, the same compound that's been administered to her daily for 2 years. "Under your direct instruction. I was following a physician's recommendation," Walter said immediately. "A digestive supplement, prescribed for her condition. "I have records. You told me this morning you'd retrieve the physician's order," Amelia said. "It's been 12 hours. These things takes."
"The records don't exist," Nathaniel said flatly.
A pause. Walter looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in his face. A micro-adjustment, the tiniest recalibration. A chess player seeing that a particular line was closed and quietly identifying the next one. "Nathaniel," he said, and the shift in register was immediate. First name now. "Not sir, not Mr. Caldwell. I have served this family since before you were old enough to ride. Your father trusted me with everything. I have dedicated my life to embezzling thousands of dollars from his estate," Nathaniel said. The words fell clean and cold. Walter didn't respond. "Property transfers in the name of Whitmore," Nathaniel continued. "Lumber deliveries for repairs that were never made. Livestock purchases for animals that don't exist. Pharmacy invoices for compounds that were going into my mother's food." His voice stayed level, but underneath it was something enormous and barely contained. "How long?" Still nothing from Walter. Nathaniel said again. And this time there was nothing contained about it. "Your father," Walter said finally, "was not the man you believed him to be." The words were spoken quietly, deliberately, and they landed exactly the way Walter intended them to land, like a grenade rolled into the center of the corridor. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "What?" he said. "Did you just say?" "Your father made certain financial arrangements over the years that required a level of discretion," Walter said. He had recovered his smoothness, completely smoothness, like a river that goes over rocks and keeps moving. Constant and undisturbed. Arrangements that, if they had come to light, would have been deeply damaging to this family's reputation. "I was the person who managed those arrangements, at his request. And yes, over time I received compensation for that management beyond my stated salary." He paused. "It was not theft, Nathaniel. It was an agreement." The silence was enormous. Amelia watched Nathaniel's face. She watched him work through it, the initial impact of the accusation. The instinct to reject it, the slower, awful recognition that a man willing to poison an old woman was certainly willing to lie about her dead husband. And then beneath all of that, the cold, clear place he arrived at. "My father is not here to deny that," Nathaniel said. "No," Walter agreed, "he isn't. Which is very convenient for you." Something moved in Walter's expression. The faintest tightening. "I'm telling you the truth," he said. "You're telling me a story," Nathaniel said. "You're telling me the story most likely to make me doubt myself and stop asking questions. You've been doing it for 23 years. You did it when my mother raised questions about the accounts. You did it when my father was dying and Renshaw had concerns. You've done it every single time someone got close to what you were actually doing." He stepped forward. "Not threatening, something worse than threatening." "Absolute. I know your voice when you're managing me." "Walter, I've been hearing it my whole life. I just didn't know that's what I was hearing." Walter looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned to Amelia. "This is your doing," he said. Quiet, like a diagnosis. "I just cooked some bread," she said. "You came into this house and turned a frightened old woman's delusions into a criminal accusation against a man who has given his life to this family. That's enough." The voice came from above them. All three turned. Margaret Caldwell stood at the top of the stairs. She was fully dressed, silver hairpin, spine straight. One hand on the banister. She had clearly been there for some time. Her face was composed with the particular composure of a woman who has been holding something for a very long time and has just decided to put it down. "Don't," she said to Walter. "Don't you dare stand in my house and call me frightened." She came down the first step. Then the second, steady, deliberate. "I have been called frightened and confused and losing my mind for 8 months. I have been put to bed and patted and told to rest while you systematically dismantled everything my husband built." Another step. "I want you to look at me, Walter. I want you to look at me and say again that I am delusional." Walter looked at her. And for the first time, the absolute first time in Amelia's observation of him, he said nothing. Margaret reached the bottom of the stairs. She walked to the center of the corridor and stood between her son and Amelia. And she looked at Walter Whitcomb with eyes that had been waiting for exactly this moment for a very long time. "My husband," she said. "Tell me about my husband. Margaret, tell me what you gave him." The silence that followed lasted long enough that Amelia counted her own heartbeats. 7, 8, 9. "I don't know what you mean," Walter said. "His final illness," Margaret said. 14 months of decline. Renshaw had questions. You redirected him. Her voice didn't waver. "My husband was 71 years old and in adequate health for his age. He rode twice a week. He reviewed his accounts every morning. He was sharp and present, and then in the space of 14 months he became a man who couldn't finish a sentence." She paused. "And then he died, and everyone said it was his age. And you were so kind and so helpful and so grief-stricken." Her jaw set. "When did you start giving it to him, Walter? Before or after he asked you about the missing livestock records?" Something happened in Walter's face. It was subtle, but Amelia saw it and Nathaniel saw it and Margaret saw it. The faintest crack in the composure, a fracture line running through 23 years of performance. He recovered in under 2 seconds, but they had all seen it. "I want a lawyer," Walter said. His voice had changed, still controlled, but stripped now of the warmth. The professional warmth was gone, and what was left was something harder and more honest. "I am not saying another word without legal representation." "That's your right," Nathaniel said. "But you're not leaving this property tonight. You can't. The east gate is watched," Nathaniel said. "The main road too. You sent a telegram to Whitmore in Richmond this afternoon and spent 40 minutes in the county land office. I know about the property transfers. I know about the parallel accounts. I have your notebook. He let that land. And by tomorrow morning I will have laboratory confirmation of what you put in my mother's food." He stepped closer. "You can wait in your room, or you can wait in the stable. But you are not leaving." Walter looked at him, then at Margaret. Then at Amelia. She could see him calculating, running every remaining line. Looking for the one that was still open. He found it. "The girl," he said, "Rosa." He looked at Amelia. "She administered the supplement. Daily for 2 years. At my instruction, yes, but her hands added it to the food. Any legal proceeding would require her testimony, and her testimony implicates her as much as anyone." He paused. "A 20-year-old girl from a poor family. The kind of girl juries look at very carefully. The threat was perfectly constructed. Clean and quiet and absolutely deliberate. Rosa, who was somewhere upstairs asleep, who had added a powder to an old woman's food every day for 2 years because she had been told it was medicine, who was 20 years old and had nobody powerful standing behind her." Amelia felt something move in her chest that was cold and focused and entirely without hesitation. "Rosa did nothing wrong," she said. "A jury might see it differently. Then we make sure they see it correctly," she said. "We make sure they hear exactly how a 20-year-old kitchen girl comes to administer a substance she was told was prescribed medication by a household manager she had every institutional reason to trust. With no knowledge of its actual nature." She held his gaze. "The only person in this corridor who knew what that powder actually was is you. You can't prove that," he said. "But Renshaw can, and your notebook can, and the Whitmore account records can, and the 14 months of pharmacy invoices can, and Margaret Caldwell's 5 pages of financial records, the ones she's been compiling since this morning, can." She paused. "You built a very careful architecture, Mr. Whitcomb. But you built it on the assumption that the people it was designed to contain would stay contained." She looked at Margaret. Then back at him. "You miscalculated." Walter looked at her for a long moment. Then something happened, the last thing she expected. He sat down, not in a chair. There was no chair in the corridor. He simply sat down on the floor with his back against the wall, the leather satchel beside him, and he looked at his hands, and he stayed there and said nothing. Nathaniel and Amelia and Margaret looked at each other. It was Margaret who spoke first. "Nathaniel," she said. "Get the sheriff." "Get him," she said. "Now, I've been waiting 8 months for this night. I'm not waiting until morning. Nathaniel looked at his mother standing straight-backed in the corridor. More herself than she'd been in a year, and he nodded once. He went for his coat. The ride to the sheriff's office took 40 minutes. The return trip with Sheriff Aldous Crane took 25 more. In that time, Amelia made coffee. Margaret sat in the study with the ledger books and her 5 pages of notes, organizing evidence with the systematic efficiency of a woman reclaiming her own history. Walter remained in the corridor. He'd been moved to the study's outer room, with the household's only remaining male servant keeping watch at a respectful distance, and he said nothing to anyone and asked for nothing. Croft, Walter's assistant, appeared at 2 a.m. looking disheveled and frightened, having been woken by the activity. He stood in the hallway and looked at the scene, and then he looked at Amelia and said, very quietly, "Is it true?" "What he's been doing?" "Yes," she said. Croft closed his eyes for a moment. Then he said, "I noticed things. Over the past year, things that didn't add up. I told myself I was misreading the accounts." He opened his eyes. "I wasn't misreading them." "No," she said. "You weren't. I should have said something." "You're saying it now," she said. "Tell the sheriff everything you noticed, every detail." "It matters." He nodded. He was pale and clearly shaken, but there was a resolution in his face that hadn't been there a minute ago. The resolution of a man who has been carrying a discomfort he couldn't name and has just been given permission to put it down and tell the truth. Sheriff Crane arrived at 2:20. He was a big man, gray-whiskered, with the economy of movement that came from 30 years of difficult situations. He listened to Nathaniel for 12 minutes without interrupting. Then he looked at the ledger books, then at Margaret's notes, then at the powder sample Amelia produced. Then he looked at Walter Whitcomb, sitting in the outer room of the study, and he said, "Walter, you want to tell me what's in this powder?" Walter looked at him. "Lawyer," he said. "That's second." He looked at his deputy. "Take him." The deputy crossed the room. Walter stood when the deputy reached him. He stood with the same composure he'd maintained through everything, through being caught, through Margaret's confrontation, through 2 hours of waiting in a corridor. He straightened his jacket. He picked up nothing from the satchel. He walked with the deputy toward the front door, with his head up and his shoulders squared. At the door he stopped. He turned and looked back into the study. At Nathaniel first, then Margaret, then Amelia. His expression was unreadable. Not remorse, not anger. Something that lived in the territory between them, the face of a man who had played a very long game and lost, and was already, somewhere inside himself, beginning to think about the next one. Then the door closed behind him. The sound it made was final. Margaret sat down, not because her legs gave out. She sat because she chose to slowly, deliberately, in the chair behind her husband's desk, the chair she had not sat in since he died. She put her hands flat on the surface of the desk and she breathed. And Amelia watched her and said nothing, because there are moments that belong entirely to the person living them and should not be interrupted. Nathaniel sat across from her. He looked at his mother. "I'm sorry," he said. The words came out rough. "I should have believed you. Months ago. A year ago." He stopped. "I'm sorry, Mama." Margaret looked at him for a long moment. "You believed the person who had never given you reason not to," she said. "And I was not always able to articulate it clearly. The more ill I became, the harder it was to hold the thread." She paused. "But I knew. I kept knowing even when I couldn't explain it. Even when everyone was looking at me with those careful eyes." Her voice went quiet. "Knowing something true that no one will confirm, that is a particular kind of loneliness." "I know," Nathaniel said. "I know that now." Sheriff Crane came back into the room. "I'll need formal statements in the morning," he said. "From all of you, and from the kitchen girl upstairs." He looked at Amelia. "You'll be here?" she said. He put his hat on. "Renshaw's confirmation comes in from Millhaven, combined with what's in that satchel." He had opened the satchel while Walter was being secured. and had gone very quiet when he looked inside it. There's enough here to hold him a good long while. What was in the satchel? Nathaniel asked. Documents, Crane said. Personal account records. Land transfer certificates. He paused. Addressed to someone in Richmond. Name of Whitmore. He looked at Nathaniel carefully. The letter references a previous arrangement and requests passage. The kind of letter a man writes when he's planning not to come back. The room absorbed this. He was leaving tonight, Margaret said. Looks that way. Ma'am, Crane said. If Miss Hartwell here hadn't heard him in that office, he looked at Amelia. You've got good ears. I'm a light sleeper, she said. Crane almost smiled. Get some rest, all of you. I'll be back at 9. You'll keep that gate watched until morning. I don't expect he had accomplices on the property. But until morning, Nathaniel confirmed. The door closed behind Crane. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been since Amelia arrived, a real quiet. Not the loaded silence of secrets pressing against walls. Just the ordinary quiet of a late night in a house where something enormous had just been set down. Rosa appeared at the study door at 3 a.m, wrapped in a shawl with her hair loose and her eyes wide. I heard, she said. Is it he gone? He's gone, Amelia said. Rosa stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she crossed to Amelia, not to Nathaniel. Not to Margaret, to Amelia, and she grabbed her hand and held it with both of hers, and didn't say anything else because there wasn't anything else to say. Amelia held her hand back. Margaret watched them from behind the desk. Rosa, she said. The girl looked up. Come here, Margaret said. Rosa crossed the room carefully, still holding Amelia's hand, and stopped in front of the desk. She looked like someone preparing to be scolded, shoulders up. Chin down, Margaret said, not unkindly. Rosa looked up. You were given a substance and told it was medicine. You administered it in good faith based on the instructions of a person in authority over you. You are not responsible for what that substance was. She held the girl's gaze. Do you understand me? Rosa's eyes were bright. She nodded. The sheriff will need your statement in the morning, Margaret said. Tell him everything exactly as it happened. Don't soften it. Don't add to it, just the pause. Can you do that? Yes. Ma'am, Rosa said. Good. Margaret looked at her for a moment longer with an expression that was complex and human and something more than employer to employee. You've been in this house for 2 years. I should have spoken with you directly. About what you were seeing. She shook her head slightly. Old habits. Keeping the right distances. She looked at her desk. Well, we'll do things differently from now on. Rosa looked at Amelia. Amelia nodded slightly. Rosa straightened. I'll have coffee ready at 7, she said. Before the sheriff comes, and she went back upstairs. And somehow the practical simplicity of it, coffee at 7. The sheriff at 9. The ordinary architecture of a morning made everything feel more real than anything else had. At 4 a.m, Nathaniel walked Amelia to the back staircase. They stood at the foot of it for a moment, neither of them quite ready to let the night finish. Renshaw's confirmation, Nathaniel said, if it shows the same compound in high enough concentration, combined with the duration. He stopped, she said quietly. We may never be able to prove it. Legally. It's been 3 years Renshaw knew him, she said. He had records of his symptom progression. He raised questions at the time. It may be enough to reopen the investigation, she paused. But Nathaniel, that's tomorrow's question. Tonight you got your mother back. That's enough for tonight, he looked at her. In the low light. With the particular exhaustion and relief and rawness of 3 o'clock in the morning, he looked like a man who had been carrying something at great cost for a very long time and had just, in the last hour, been allowed to set it down. You've been here 3 days, he said. I have, she said. You walked into a house you'd never seen, with people you'd never met, and saw what 23 years of trust had blinded everyone else to. He paused. How do you carry that? Seeing things other people don't. She thought about it honestly. I don't carry it, she said. I just look. I've always had to look carefully at things because nobody was going to look out for me if I didn't look for myself. She met his eyes. That's not a gift. That's just what it costs to grow up without a safety net. He was quiet for a moment. It's worth more than a gift, he said. She looked away. Then back. Get some sleep, she said. You have a long day tomorrow. She went up the stairs. He stood at the bottom and watched her go, and then stood there a moment longer in the quiet house. In the absence of Walter Whitcomb for the first time in 23 years. And he breathed it in the unfamiliar clean air of a house no longer holding secrets, and he thought about a woman who carried no name and no position and no protection, and had walked through his front door and given his mother back to him. He thought about a lot of things. Then he went to his father's study and stayed there until dawn, going through every ledger Walter had ever touched, with his mother's 5 pages of notes beside him, and the slow, methodical work of it settled something in him that needed settling, the work of reclaiming his own history. Line by careful line, on a night when truth had finally stopped being quiet. Morning came gray and cold, the way Virginia mornings did in October, and it found Amelia at the stove before anyone else was up. She made bread, the same bread she had made the first morning, flour and water and salt and thyme. Nothing complicated, nothing hidden. The kind of bread that smelled like what it was, and tasted like what it was, and told the truth from the first bite. Margaret came down at 6:30. She stood in the kitchen doorway in her day clothes, hair properly pinned, and she looked at Amelia at the stove, and she looked at the bread cooling on the cloth, and she said, "You know you don't have to do that this morning." "I know," Amelia said. "I wanted to." Margaret crossed to the work table and sat down across from the bread. She didn't wait to be served. She broke off a piece herself and ate it. And the ease of it, the simple, ordinary ease of a woman eating bread in her own kitchen on a morning when the world had righted itself, was the most quietly extraordinary thing Amelia had seen in 3 days. "Renshaw will be here at 9, Margaret said. "Yes." "Crane at 9 too." "Yes." And then Margaret said, "We find out what Walter actually did to my husband."
Yes, Amelia said.
"We find out." Margaret ate another piece of bread. "Whatever we find," she said, "I want you to know something." She looked up at Amelia. "I have spent 68 years in rooms full of people who were confident they knew better than me. About my own accounts. About my own house." She paused. "You walked in and listened. Just listened. You believed what I told you before you had any reason to." Her voice was steady, but there was something in it that went all the way down. "That's not a small thing, Miss Hartwell. Don't let anyone tell you it is." Amelia held her gaze. "You weren't hard to believe," she said. "You were just saying true things." "Yes," Margaret said. "I was." She looked at the bread in her hand. Funny how long the truth can sit in a room without anyone seeing it. Outside, the sun was coming up over the Caldwell land. Inside, the kitchen smelled like bread and coffee, and the particular clean smell of a house that has just stopped keeping secrets. And at 9 o'clock, when Sheriff Crane came through the front door with his deputy and doctor, Renshaw came through the east gate with his confirmation and a face that had aged 10 years overnight. The Caldwell family was ready, all 3 of them, standing. Dr. Renshaw didn't say good morning when he walked through the east gate at 9 o'clock. He walked straight to Nathaniel, put his medical bag on the study table, and opened it without ceremony. He set 3 documents on the desk. "Antimony sulfide," he said. "Confirmed. The concentration in the container samples is consistent with long-term low-dose administration. The powder sample Miss Hartwell retrieved from Rosa shows the same compound at a measurably higher concentration than what would be prescribed for any legitimate medicinal purpose." He paused. "There is no legitimate medicinal purpose for this compound administered to a healthy adult in these quantities." None. The room was very quiet. Margaret sat behind her husband's desk. Nathaniel stood beside her. Amelia stood at the edge of the room, where she had positioned herself since the beginning, close enough to see everything, far enough to let the people who needed the center of it have it. Sheriff Crane picked up the documents. He read them slowly. Then he set them down and looked at Renshaw. "In your professional opinion," Crane said, "is this consistent with intentional poisoning?" Renshaw didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. "Over what period of time, given Mrs. Caldwell's symptom progression, as she described it to me this morning, the appetite loss beginning 8 months ago. The progressive weakness, the bitter taste, I would estimate active administration for at least 10 months. Possibly longer if earlier doses were lower." He looked at Margaret directly. "Your body was fighting it. That's why you refused the food. Your instincts were correct from the beginning." Margaret received this without flinching. She had known it. She had known it for months. Hearing it confirmed by science and a doctor's testimony was not a surprise, it was a vindication. And vindication, after that long a silence, had its own particular weight that required a moment to absorb. "My husband," she said. Renshaw looked at her. His face carried something heavy. "I reviewed my records from his final illness last night," he said. "I kept detailed notes at the time, even after I was removed from his care. The symptom progression: fatigue, appetite decline, cardiac irregularity, cognitive slowing over 14 months is consistent with chronic antimony exposure." He stopped. "I cannot make a definitive statement without exhumation and toxicological analysis. But in my professional judgment, he was poisoned too," Margaret said. "I believe so," Renshaw said. "Yes, the word landed in the room and nobody spoke for a full 10 seconds. Then Nathaniel said very quietly, 'He's been in custody since 2 this morning and he hasn't said a word.' 'He won't,' Crane said. 'Not without a lawyer and not in this county. But with what Renshaw has just given me, combined with the financial documents in that satchel." He picked up his hat. "I'm going to need to contact the state prosecutor's office. This is larger than a county matter now. The property transfers," Nathaniel said. "The Whitmore accounts, how far back do they go? Based on what I've reviewed so far?" "At least 6 years," Crane said, "possibly 8. We'll need a full audit." He looked at Nathaniel. "This is going to take time, months most likely before it comes to trial." "Maybe longer. I have time," Nathaniel said. Crane looked at Amelia. "Your statement this morning was thorough. I may need you again as this proceeds." "I'll be available," she said. Crane nodded, gathered his documents, and left with his deputy. The sound of horses departing carried through the walls. And then the house was quiet again, the same quiet it had been at 4 in the morning. But fuller now, settled, the quiet of a place that had finally told its truth out loud and was resting in the aftermath. Renshaw stayed. He sat across from Margaret and they talked for an hour, not about the case, not about Walter, but about her husband, about the man Henry Caldwell had been before the decline, about the particular way he had loved this land and this family, about the questions Renshaw had raised and been turned away from and had never fully let go of. Amelia left them to it. Rosa was there, washing the brick west things with a quiet focus that meant she was keeping herself upright through the familiar motion of work. She looked up when Amelia came in. "How did it go?" Rosa asked. "Confirmed," Amelia said. "Renshaw's confirmation is official. Crane has everything he needs." Rosa set down the cup she was holding. She pressed both hands flat on the edge of the sink and breathed. "Her husband too," she said. "Possibly they'll investigate." Rosa made a sound that was not quite a word. Then she turned around and leaned against the sink and looked at Amelia with eyes that had been holding too much for too long and had finally been given permission to let some of it go. "I gave her that powder every day, for 2 years. Every single day, Miss Hartwell. I put it in her food. I watched her push the bowl away, and I thought she was just..." She stopped. "I thought I was helping her." "Rosa," Amelia said. "I know what you're going to say." "Then listen to it again," Amelia said. "Because knowing something and believing it are different things, and you're going to need to believe it eventually. So you might as well start now." She crossed the kitchen and stood across the work table from the girl. "You were 20 years old. You were given instructions by the person responsible for this household's operations. You had no knowledge of the substance's actual nature. You had no reason to question it and every institutional reason to trust it. She held Rosa's gaze. The moment you had reason to question, the moment I gave you a reason, you acted immediately. You put that powder in your apron pocket and you handed it to me. That decision, that choice, right there, that is the measure of your character. Not 2 years of following instructions you had no reason to doubt. Rosa's chin trembled, then steadied. Mrs. Caldwell said the same thing, she said. Mrs. Caldwell is a very wise woman, Amelia said. Rosa almost smiled. She's terrifying, she said. That too, Amelia agreed. Rosa picked up the cup again and finished washing it. And the small ordinariness of it felt like something healing, the way a person tests a mended bone by putting weight on it. Carefully, to see if it holds, it held. Nathaniel found Amelia in the kitchen at noon. He had spent the morning in the study with the ledger books and Croft, who had turned out to know considerably more than anyone had given him credit for. Croft had been Walter's assistant for 3 years and had kept his own quiet notes of things that didn't add up, filed in a personal journal he now produced with the relief of a man unburdening a weight he'd been carrying alone. Nathaniel sat down at the kitchen work table and set a piece of paper in front of him. He looked at it for a moment. 8 years, he said. The full audit isn't complete, but Croft and I have traced it back 8 years. The parallel accounts, the false invoices, the land transfers, 8 years. He looked up at Amelia. He started while my father was still in full health. Before any of the poisoning, before any of the decline. He was embezzling for years before he decided the embezzlement needed to be protected. He got in too deep to stop, Amelia said. Yes. And when my father started asking about the livestock numbers, Croft remembers the conversation. 3 years ago, my father questioning Walter directly about certain account discrepancies, Walter made a choice. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He chose to eliminate the threat rather than correct the crime. And then your mother picked up where your father left off. She always did, Nathaniel said. There was something in his voice when he said it. Grief and pride wound so tightly together they couldn't be separated. She ran this estate alongside my father for 40 years. She knew these accounts the way she knew the layout of this house. Walter underestimated how much she retained even after my father died. He paused. He thought grief would slow her down long enough for him to cover his tracks completely. It didn't. No, Amelia said. It didn't. He looked at the paper in front of him again. There's enough, he said, for the embezzlement charges. Crane is confident. The poisoning charges depend on Renshaw's testimony and the compound analysis, which are solid. He stopped. My father's case exhumation has to be approved by the courts. It will take time, but it will happen, she said. Yes, he said, it will happen. He folded the paper. I owe you more than I know how to say. She shook her head. You don't owe me anything, she said. I came here to cook for your mother. I cooked for her. Everything else was just paying attention. Amelia. He said her name with a deliberateness that meant he wanted her to actually hear what came next. I rode to a bakery in the middle of the night because I had run out of everything else. I had no idea what you would find when you got here. I had no idea. Stopped. My mother is sitting in my father's study right now, running through account books with Croft. She's been at it for 3 hours. She stood in a corridor last night and faced down a man who spent years trying to erase her, and she didn't flinch. His voice went rough at the edges. She was disappearing. Month by month, she was disappearing. And you walked in and you believed her, and that was enough. That was the thing that started all of it. He looked at her directly. How do I account for that? Amelia was quiet for a moment. You don't, she said. You just don't do what he did. You listen to the people in your house. You don't confuse trust with blindness. You pay attention to who controls what and whether that control is being used well. She met his eyes. That's all. That's the whole lesson. It's not complicated. It should have been obvious before, he said. Most important things should have been obvious before, she said. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you learned. He held her gaze. Then he reached into his coat pocket and set something on the work table between them. A key. She looked at it without touching it. The east kitchen, he said. There's a building on the east side of the property, used to be the secondary kitchen, when the estate had a full household staff. It's been empty for 15 years. It's large, it has good equipment. It has a separate entrance from the main road. He paused. I'd like to have it restored. Properly. And I'd like you to run it. She looked at the key. Then at him. That's not what you brought me here for, she said. No, he said. What I brought you here for is finished. My mother is eating. The man who was poisoning her is in custody. What I'm asking now is separate. He kept his voice steady. I'm asking you to stay, not as a servant, not as household staff. As I don't know the right word for it. A person who runs her own operation on this property. On her own terms, answering to nobody. A pause. My mother suggested it this morning. Actually, before I'd thought of it myself, Amelia looked at the key for a long moment. She thought about her bakery in town, the crooked door that never closed straight, the faded sign, the narrow bed in the back room where she'd lived alone for 6 years, the work she loved done in a space that was hers, that nobody could take from her. She thought about what it meant to a woman like her, a woman with no name, no family money, no position to own the place where she worked. Even if it was small, even if the sign was faded, she thought about what it meant to be offered something by a person with power, and all the ways that kind of offer could go wrong. Why, she said, not suspiciously, just honestly. Nathaniel seemed to understand the weight of the question. Because this estate almost destroyed itself from the inside out, because the people in it stopped seeing clearly, he said. Because I spent 23 years trusting the wrong person and not trusting the right ones. Because my mother spent 8 months being invisible in her own home, and a woman who had no reason to help her was the one who saw her. He paused. I don't want to run a household that can be hollowed out again. I want people around me who know how to look, who know how to see. He looked at her steadily. You see things, Amelia. You see people. That's not something I can hire. It's something I want to earn. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, somewhere on the estate, a door opened and closed. The ordinary sound of a house going about its morning. I have a bakery in town, she said. It's mine. I built it, I know that too. A woman like me doesn't get many chances to own something, she said. I won't give that up. I'm not asking you to, he said. I'm asking you to build something bigger, on your own terms. With the resources to do it properly. He looked at her. But if the answer is no, if you want to go back to Marin Street and your crooked door and your own 4 walls, I will understand it completely, and I will be grateful for the rest of my life for what you've already done. She looked at the key on the table. She thought about Margaret, running account books in the study. About Rosa washing cups with steady hands, about Renshaw, who had carried a question for 3 years and was finally getting to ask it properly. About Nathaniel, standing in a corridor at midnight, looking at a man he had trusted for 23 years and choosing, finally, to see clearly. She picked up the key. She held it in her palm and felt the weight of it. Show me the east kitchen, she said. Something moved across his face. Something that was relief, and something more than relief. Now, he said. Now, she said. He stood up. She followed him out the kitchen door and across the east grounds in the cold October air. And he showed her the east kitchen, large, dusty. Still, with good bones and equipment that needed work, but was solid underneath the neglect, and she walked through it the way she walked through any kitchen. Slowly, reading it, understanding what it was and what it could be. She stood in the center of it and turned around once. 6 months, she said, to get it operational. I can have a crew here in 2 weeks, he said. I choose the equipment, of course. I set the terms of what I produce and who I sell to. Yes, and I keep the bakery in town, she said. I'll find someone good to run it. But it stays mine, yes. And Rosa, she said, I want her here if she wants to be. Her choice, not an assignment. He nodded, her choice. She looked around the room one more time. Then she closed her hand around the key. "All right," she said. He let out a breath. One long, quiet breath, the kind that carries more than air. They walked back to the main house together and didn't say much. And the silence between them was different from all the silences that had come before, not loaded. Not cautious, not full of things unsaid. Just the silence of two people who have understood something important about each other and don't need to fill it with words. At the back door, she stopped. "Nathaniel," she said. He turned. "Your mother," she said. "Whatever they find about your father, and they will find something, she's going to need you to be steady. She is steady herself. She doesn't need comfort so much as she needs you to not fall apart." She looked at him. "Can you do that?" He thought about it. Honestly. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said. She went inside. He stood at the back door for a moment in the cold air, and he thought about 23 years and 3 days, and everything the distance between those two numbers had cost his family. He thought about a woman who had walked in carrying a canvas pack and flour on her hands and had seen, in 72 hours, what years of proximity had hidden from everyone who lived here. He thought about his father and felt the grief of that fully, for the first time, not the managed grief of a man maintaining composure. But the real thing, the heavy thing, the grief that comes when you understand not just that someone is gone but how they were taken. He let himself feel it for a moment. Then he went inside. Margaret was still in the study when he returned. She had sent Croft on a specific errand to retrieve the original property transfer certificates from the county land office, and she was alone with the ledger books, reading quietly, with a cup of tea at her elbow that was still steaming, which meant Rosa was watching over her without being asked. He sat down across from his mother. She looked up. "She's staying," Margaret said. "She's staying," he said. Margaret nodded once, satisfied, and looked back at the ledger. Then she said, without looking up, "She reminds me of myself. At her age." He looked at his house. "Oh," he said. "She walks into rooms and she sees what's actually there," Margaret said. "Not what she expects. Not what she's been told. What's actually there." She turned a page. "That's rarer than it sounds. I spent most of my 20s learning how to do it." She already knows. She paused. "Don't be slow, Nathaniel." He stared at her. "Mama, I'm reading," she said. He closed his mouth. 3 weeks later, the crew arrived for the East Kitchen. Amelia was there at 7 in the morning when the first wagon pulled up. And she walked the foreman through every room, every measurement, every specification she had written up in the 3 weeks since she'd accepted that key. She had spent those weeks in town finishing her final season of orders. Finding a young woman named Bess Merriweather who had been working in the Harrow County Bakehouse and had more talent than the position gave her room to show. She had trained Bess for 2 weeks, handed her the keys to Hartwell's, the actual keys, along with the deed arrangement that would transfer full ownership to Bess in 2 years if she wanted it, and driven east. She had not looked back, not because there was nothing worth looking at, but because what was ahead was worth looking at more. Rosa chose to come. She had asked for 3 days to decide, which Amelia had told her to take, and at the end of those 3 days, she appeared at the East Kitchen building with her personal belongings in a bag and a look on her face that was determined and a little afraid and completely certain. "I want to learn," Rosa said. "Everything you know. I want to learn it." "Then you will," Amelia said. The East Kitchen opened in the spring. It opened quietly, no announcement, no ceremony. Just a door unlocked at 6 in the morning, and bread in the oven by 6:15, and the smell of it carrying through the Caldwell property in a way that made people stop what they were doing and turn their heads. By 8 o'clock, there were 4 people from the estate staff who had found reasons to be near the East Kitchen. By 9, Margaret arrived with her tea and sat at the work table and watched Amelia and Rosa work with the particular satisfaction of a woman who has set something in motion and is watching it move. "Good bread," Margaret said, breaking off a piece. "Same as always," Amelia said. "Better," Margaret said. "You have the equipment now." Amelia looked around the kitchen, properly outfitted, properly lit. the equipment she had specified installed exactly as she'd requested. She thought about the narrow kitchen on Marin Street, the crooked door, the morning she had worked in near dark because the window was too small. She thought about what it had cost her not in money, but in effort and solitude, and the particular discipline of a woman who has learned to want only what she can actually have. She thought about the difference between that and this. This was what it felt like when the ceiling lifted. Better, she agreed. Walter Whitcomb's trial began in February. Amelia was called to testify on the third day. She took the stand in a courtroom that was packed. Harrow County turned out for this. The kind of trial that rewrote what people thought they knew about a man and a family and 23 years of assumed stability. She answered every question directly, without elaboration, without performance. She described what she had found, how she had found it, what she had done with it. She described Rosa's testimony and the powder and Dr. Renshaw's confirmation. She described the notebook and the ledger entries and the parallel accounts. The defense attorney tried once to suggest that she had been looking for trouble when she arrived, that a poor woman with no standing had come into a wealthy household and invented a scandal to make herself relevant. She waited for him to finish. Then she said, "I came to this house to cook bread for a sick woman. I found what I found because I paid attention. If paying attention is a crime, I'd invite you to explain that to Mrs. Margaret Caldwell, who paid attention for 3 years and was told she was confused." The courtroom was very quiet after that. The attorney moved on. Walter was convicted on 7 counts of fraud, 3 counts of falsification of records, and 2 counts of criminal poisoning, 1 for Margaret, 1 for her husband, whose exhumation had provided the toxicological evidence Renshaw had predicted. The jury took 4 hours. The judge gave him 20 years. When the verdict was read, Margaret sat straight-backed in the gallery and said nothing. She did not cry. She did not close her eyes. She looked at Walter Whitcomb being led out of the courtroom, and she looked at him the way she had looked at him in the corridor that night, clear-eyed, unblinking, with the particular steadiness of a woman who has been waiting a very long time for the right ending and is not going to waste it on anything less than full attention. Nathaniel was beside her. He reached over and took her hand. She let him. On the ride home from the courthouse, just the 2 of them in the carriage, Margaret said, "Your father would have liked her, you know." Nathaniel kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I know," he said. "He had a talent for recognizing people who saw clearly," Margaret said. "It was one of his best qualities. Took him a while to apply it to his household management." But she made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Well, he got there eventually." Nathaniel said nothing for a moment. "Then, Mama, I'm sorry for not getting there sooner. You got there," she said, "when it mattered. That's enough." She squeezed his hand once. He squeezed back, and they rode home through the Virginia countryside in the early afternoon light, through the land that had been Henry Caldwell's and was now Nathaniel's, and had nearly been stolen piece by piece by a man who had counted on trust being indistinguishable from blindness and had been wrong. Amelia was in the east kitchen when they got back. She heard the carriage and came to the door. She looked at their faces as they came up the path, Nathaniel's face, which told her everything, and Margaret's face, which confirmed it, and she stepped back to let them inside. "Well," Rosa said from behind her. 20 years, Amelia said. Rosa exhaled. Long, slow, the exhale of a girl who had carried something for a long time and was finally, completely, putting it down. Margaret came into the kitchen and looked at the bread cooling on the cloth and sat down at the work table and said, "Is there coffee?" "Always," Rosa said, and went to get it. The 4 of them sat together in the east kitchen that afternoon, the grand old woman who had refused to disappear, the man who had learned to see clearly when it finally mattered, the young girl who had chosen truth over ease, and the poor baker woman with flour on her hands who had walked through a door 3 months ago and changed everything, and they drank coffee and said things and didn't say things and listened to the fire in the stove and the ordinary settling. Sounds of a house that had found its way back to itself. At one point, Margaret said, to no one in particular, "This is the best coffee I've had in 3 years." "Nothing's changed about the coffee," Rosa said. Confused. "Everything has changed," Margaret said simply. "That's the point." Later, when the afternoon was getting long and the kitchen was warm, and Margaret had finally gone upstairs to rest, and Rosa was washing the cups with her quiet, steady hands, Nathaniel stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at Amelia at the stove. "You know what the people in town are saying," he said. "Something unflattering, I expect," she said. "Something unflattering about the poor baker woman who walked into the Caldwell house and didn't know her place," he said. "And something else underneath that, the other thing people say when they're not quite willing to say the first thing out loud." He paused. "They say she's the one who saved them, the family. They say she saw what nobody else could see." Amelia stirred the pot on the stove. "People say a lot of things," she said. "They do," he said. "This one happens to be true." She looked over her shoulder at him. He was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, and his face open in a way it hadn't been when she first met him, not the face of a man performing authority. Just a man, standing in his own kitchen doorway on a good day, looking at a woman he respected. "Nathaniel," she said. "Yes, go check on your mother." He smiled. It was a real smile, unhurried, unperformed, the kind that started in the eyes. "Yes." "Ma'am," he said. He went. Amelia turned back to the stove and stirred the pot and listened to the house, this house that had been full of secrets, and was now full of something else. Something that took up more space and made more noise and was infinitely harder to hollow out. She had come here with flour on her hands and a canvas pack and 27 years of knowing that the only thing standing between her and the world was her own 2 hands and her own clear eyes. She had not come to save anyone. She had come to cook bread. But sometimes the truest things arrive unannounced: a woman at a door, a key on a table, a bowl of soup hurled against a wall by someone who refused to disappear, and what you do with them, in the moment you are handed them, is the whole of who you are. Amelia Hartwell had always known what she was. She was a woman who paid attention. And in a world full of people looking away, that was enough to change everything.